Hi, you're watching Comic Talk. I'm Josh. This is Drew. And this is our bargain bin episode. Our bargain bin's when we talk about underpriced and underrated titles that you can get for way cheaper than you should. This week we're going to be talking about Edward. Is it Edward?
Edward.
What's his name? Brubaker.
Ed.
Okay.
Yeah.
This week we'll be talking about Ed Brubaker's Catwoman. This is Series 3 of Catwoman. I believe this came out in the early 2000s.
Yeah, about 2002, I think is when it debuted.
All right, we'll be talking about two storylines from this series that we think you should go ahead and give a shot. Catwoman number 1 through 4, which is here. And then also, to follow up with that, 12 through 16. Fan them out and make them pretty. These are what we think the best two that you can get at a great price. I believe we priced this out, and you can get all 9 of these comics for under $15.
Yeah, easily under 15.
So it's considerably cheaper than going and grabbing something off the shelf, and very likely to be much better. So this first 4, the art on this was by Cooke and Allred. If you're familiar with comics at all, you've probably read something that they've done. They're pretty well-known artists, and they're quite good, and everybody knows Brubaker. So, Drew, let's talk about this a little bit. You want to go into a little detail on this first series 1 through 4?
Issue number 1 is really going to start out redefining Catwoman, redefining her whole mythos, her whole outlook on life, her costume. She finally loses the tail, thank God, in this series. And the first story arc sort of revolves around that, her sort of reinventing herself. When a bunch of prostitutes show up missing, she has to decide what it really means to be this new Catwoman. Okay,
so Drew, if we're going to talk about this first 4, I think what we really need to do first is talk about this first issue. I think that's pretty important here.
Definitely. The first issue is quintessential Brubaker, in my opinion. Most everything is internal. It's all thought bubbles, internal dialogue narration. She's having some trouble sleeping and sort of coping with this person she's become. She feels that when she started out, she was sort of the like the female Robin Hood of the East End of Gotham. You know, she was stealing money from all these rich people and stuff, but she never forgot, where she came from. She would always come by and give money to her old friends, her old neighbors, stuff like that. And over time, she sort of started to distance herself from that and become concerned with how can I get a bigger score? How can I get myself mentioned in the same sentence as the Gotham elite, climb the social ladder, so to speak? This is really her, again, trying to distance herself from all that and go back to her roots. Really occupy the gray space that, and she even points it out, she says, the things that Batman can't handle, because he doesn't understand what it's like to be a good person in a bad situation.
He lives in black and white, and she lives in gray.
Exactly.
I think these first 4 are sort of the redemption of Catwoman. It focuses a lot on her moving away from, like you said, being just a thief to wanting to be something more, wanting to make something of herself. And I think they do a really good job of making that happen here. I was really impressed with this series. I can't believe that this can even be a bargain bin
right, it shouldn't
series.
Be.
This should not be. This is something, all of these should be selling for a premium. It's a really good series. The artwork is really cool. It's different and unique. You immediately know who it is. Even though it's Cooke and Allred, who are pretty famous artists, I feel like they really gave it their all to sort of give this a unique feel.
Definitely. There are some very traditional, classic things about it. The girls with the cute, triangle chin, and like the smile that's the teeth. It's just one band of white,
Yeah, the thing that I really love, though, is that they don't... they eschew sort of a lot of the Catwoman cliches and sort of trite over-sexualizations. In this, she's still hot. It's still a very sexy title, but it's not in your face. It's not done in a cheesy fanboy cheesecake sort of way.
Yeah, her boobs aren't all out, like on every cover.
Right, and she's hot. A lot of the reason she's hot is because she's cool. She's smart and introspective and tough.
Yeah.
You know, she
Confident. She's very confident.
Yeah, you can see a lot of even maybe from this time period. This is the early 2000s, so you can see where possibly things like Alias and a lot of these TV shows, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where this female empowerment was very big, and this new attempt in new media to sort of push away from the stereotypical female lead and round them out. And I think this is probably one of the first successful comic titles to do that in that time period.
Definitely. And I can't emphasize enough. No tail, no cat puns, none of that crap. This is just a well-written comic. One of my favorite superheroines. I don't even know if it's fair to call her that. She's a tweener.
She's definitely an anti-hero in this, I would say.
I could say. Yeah.
She goes to lengths that Batman or Superman or most DC characters wouldn't go to. She's a little more brutal with people. She's tougher. She doesn't mind even killing people.
Yeah, not at all. And that kind of brings me to one of the other issues that I wanted to ask you about. What did you think about the social issues that are present?
I could take them or leave them. I'm never too into the social side of this sort of thing, the social commentary. I think it's interesting, but it's not why I was reading it. It's not what kept me engaged.
Definitely. I don't think it's crucial to the comic by any means, but I do think there's something to be said for the fact that this is maybe the first comic to portray prostitutes, ex-drug addicts. It all gives them a fair shake. You know, this isn't somebody taking out a drug dealer. This is her best friend, used to be a drug addict. Some of her other best friends used to be or are currently prostitutes. Not to say that this condones anything, you know, by any means, but she does make a point of treating everybody as a human being.
True.
Which, you know, is sort of alien for the superhero genre in general. You know,
I think this, in a lot of ways, this is throwing back to a lot of the 80s DC stuff that really sort of got lost in the 90s. The 90s, it became a lot about, you know, big bombastic characters again. But in the 80s, we had a lot of DC stuff by people like Moore and Morrison. A lot of these guys doing stuff with and O'Neill as well.
We can't forget Speedy getting addicted to smack.
Right, a lot of heroin and drug addicts and things like the Doom Patrol. These sort of edge case characters that you're not sure if they're heroes or not. Swamp Thing, you know, we could go on and on and on and list these kind of characters that were really big in the 80s, and we just sort of lost them for a while. And I think this was a real resurgence of that type of writing, where it's just a little more counterculture. It's a little bit darker tone. I liked it a lot, and I do agree with you on that aspect of the social bit of it. It didn't even cross my mind, to be honest with you. But as you bring it up, I actually did relate to that quite a bit.
And I would say it's even maybe a step beyond some of the O'Neill stuff and the Moore stuff, in that it's not like, oh no, somebody we know is now a drug addict. Like, what are we gonna do? This is just dealing with real people who have real issues, and it doesn't pass judgment on them.
Right.
You know, her whole thing is sometimes bad things happen to good people, and you have to respect that, and, you know, not immediately pass judgment on somebody for their past transgressions or current transgressions even. Back to the art. I really like the way that the Whip is portrayed in these first 4 issues. Just this big, sprawly, it's almost like an animal or something like that in itself.
Physics don't really relate to the Whip in a proper way.
Yeah, or maybe even like the Venom symbiote and some of the Spider-Man stuff, how it just kind of like... Blah.
I would also like to mention there's some Batman cameos in here.
Yes.
That are fantastic. I really like her interactions with Batman. It's very tasteful, and it's just sparse. There's just enough of it to make sure you understand or you realize that he's still involved. He's still an important part of her world, but he's not the focus. He's another person who, from the perspective of this book, from reading it as following Selena, he's maybe not as great as she is. You
Right.
know, she's pointing out his flaws and why they're not together and why he's a past flame, which I really enjoyed that aspect of this.
Yeah. And given that limited interaction, I think you really also get a very strong sense of their relationship and their dynamic interacting with one another. And that's really impressive given how limited their interaction is.
A few pages, really.
A few panels here and
yeah,
there.
Yeah, and the little bit that they have in here, I think, blows away anything in the new Catwoman that I've seen with Catwoman and Batman. Previous to 41.
Yeah, okay. There's not very many good Catwoman writers.
Sure.
To be fair. I think that's maybe why this one gets looked over a lot, because Catwoman doesn't get a fair shake 90% of the time. And I did think it was kind of interesting how she always refers to him as him.
Him, yeah.
It's always him when he comes up in conversation. And she gives him this sort of Gotham's guardian angel thing. Like, she sees him for his flaws and stuff like that, but she still, I think, sees him as this sort of beacon of the way that things ideally should be.
She respects him.
I almost got kind of, like when you hear Christians and stuff talk about God or Jesus and they capitalize like he or him or something like that. I almost got that kind of vibe from this. Not to say that she regards Batman as this holy figure in any way, but I mean, kind of.
Yeah, a little bit. And again, the Batman aspect is pretty limited in this, but it is important in the mythos. Everybody understands it's important in the mythos.
Yeah.
So they touch on it just enough to give you what you need to understand where that's at and how she fits into that world, because she is in Gotham. She lives in Batman's world.
Right.
So he does a really great job of balancing that without ever letting Batman take over the book by any stretch of the imagination.
I also thought it was cute how at one point she calls him a Boy Scout, which is great because in every Batman reader's mind, Superman is the Boy Scout. And here's Catwoman saying the same thing about, your beloved Batman, my beloved Batman. And I have to say the comic kind of makes a case for it. This does feel like a slightly grittier, more involved, more morally ambiguous title overall.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So the second half of this bargain bin find is the Catwoman 12 through 16. This is still Brubaker, but we have a different artist now. This is Stewart doing the art. So you want to kind of give us a quick synopsis on what's going on in this?
In the prior series, we see Selena kind of setting herself up for this person that she wants to be, returning to the sort of Robin Hood roots, so to speak, and taking care of her family and her community and her neighborhood and whatnot. And in the beginning, things really seem to be going her way. She's opened a community center for the Gotham's East End. Her sister, who she hasn't seen in, I think, at least a decade, and her husband are moving to Gotham because he got a job there. Her friend, Holly, everything's going great with her. I mean, everything's just really fantastic. I think it's within the first issue. She's like, this is probably the best day I've had in a long time. Right after saying that, the community center explodes.
So this second half to this is where everything starts to fall apart, or reality sets in, and she realizes that she still lives in Gotham and deals with the worst part of Gotham. I feel like, right off the bat, I'd like to mention that the change in artist is fitting with the second half of this. The way this sort of devolves and falls apart, storyline-wise, I think is perfect for Stewart, which is somebody who I don't think I've read before. I don't recognize his work, but I love the work, actually.
Yeah, I think it's great.
It's very classic. It's very DC from the 80s. You could easily mistake this book for something from the 80s, I think.
One of the things that really caught me about this new artist team, the way that they portray action scenes is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like a Jet Li movie or something like that. Everything's just real clever and acrobatics and, things that you would, in your mind, like imagine, okay, this is like how Catwoman would fight.
It has a bit of a feminine Spider-Man feel almost.
I could
the way
see that.
she can move and the way she interacts with the world, which I really dug that.
Mm-hmm.
But also with this, I really like the way she, at this point with both the writing and the art, that it's matured and she's become a truly central hero of the book. And the characters around her are really supporting characters for a heroine.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really fantastic. And she even has a suitor, a male who could be a protagonist in his own book.
Oh yeah, he's perfectly capable.
This Slam guy, what's this?
Slam Bradley.
Slam Bradley. I
Yeah.
love the character. He reminds me of Harvey Bullock.
Mm-hmm.
He's big and tough and burly and
And
beat
Miles
up.
Davis and Coltrane.
Yeah, he's cultural and just a cool guy, from my opinion. I really like the character.
Yeah.
And he's through this series, he's slowly trying to court her, and she makes him act like a child. He doesn't even know how to handle her,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a wonderful way of showing how powerful and strong she is, and how
Definitely.
much she commands a presence. I think it was a brilliant move, and it really helps cement this second arc.
Yeah, because he is a tough guy. I mean, he takes out a whole bar full of people, I think, on a couple of occasions.
Yeah.
And then every time he talks about her, he's like, I'm sorry, I know I sound like I'm in high school or something, but, I don't really know which way is up with this broad.
Yeah.
Something along those lines.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I love the addition of this fella. I will say I read 1 through 4, and then I read 12 through 16.
Mm-hmm.
You read the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
In between there is where this character shows up.
Mm-hmm.
And at first he, from my perspective of jumping from one to the other, it was a bit of surprise early on, but very quickly you understand the dynamic. Do you want to explain just quickly what happened in between for the readers who may go out and pick this up like I did and want to know where he came from?
There's a lot of corruption going on in the Gotham police, big shock. And that's really what he's about. He's trying to expose corruption within the police, and that's where Catwoman's journey kind of leads her. So they get this sort of common interest, commonality kind of thing going on, and that's where the relationship starts.
Gotcha.
It's cute.
So overall, what's your feeling of this second series?
Brilliant.
I think so too.
I wrote down some adjectives. Dark, defeatist, introspective, despair, revenge, insanity, self-perpetuating poverty, love, hope, betrayal, sacrifice. It's amazing, I think, that I can use all of those to talk about 5 issues of a Catwoman comic.
Yeah, it's a real roller coaster. I burned through these 5 in one sitting as quickly as I could. I had to slow myself down as I was reading to really pull all of it in. I wanted to just move through it because it was just so compelling.
It really is, and there's so many powerful scenes.
Mm-hmm.
It always seems to get really powerful when she's showering.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But she has a real breakdown at one point where she's questioning everything she's doing and if it's all worth it, and all these bad things are happening and it's clearly my fault. Despair.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how in these comics, as she takes over this hero role, she starts to have the same problems that we see with a lot of heroes, especially in the DC universe, where they start taking the world on their shoulders and everything starts to become their fault. They start to believe that they're the cause of all of the terrible things in the world, where in previous Catwoman that I've read, that's not this Brubaker run, or in other media that I've seen in which she was involved,
Sure.
She's usually the opposite of that. She's carefree. She's sort of the wild spirit versus Batman's sense of responsibility. And here we see her as she tries to be more and more like Bruce Wayne or Batman, sort of take on more and more of his personality traits.
And I think it's maybe even a bit harder for her because of the sort of moral ambiguity that she concerns herself with. Mm-hmm. There's sometimes it's not clear black and white. Sometimes you could clearly see a counter argument, not that you necessarily agree with it, but that it's there. A lot of people feel that way, and that weighs on her pretty heavily throughout, I think, pretty much the whole series.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's all well and good, like, okay, I'm going to go operate in the gray area. But then, you're in the gray area.
Right.
Like, I have my gray area, you have your gray area, she has her gray area. And, trying to define black and whites within gray is clearly more difficult than it is trying to define black and white within black and white.
Lastly, there were multiple moments in here that were laugh out loud funny as well. She interrogates a car dealer. She uses Holly to lure the guy into his office, thinking that he's gonna
Get him some?
Get some, and she's there waiting for him. It's a setup, and she interrogates him. But what I loved there is she's ready to. She interrogates him. She's ready to be done. She wasn't going to mess with him. She's trying to go straight.
Right.
She's trying to be a better person. And in his plead for her not to hurt him, he says, "I have a wife and kids."
Mm-hmm.
And she turns on a dime. She's like, "Well, I wasn't going to hurt you, but the wife and kids thing. Now maybe I have a different opinion." And it's just implied what happens from there. Then you see, and he's all tied up and in his underwear on his desk. That was pretty fantastic.
It's pretty good. One other one was when her sister and her husband are first driving into the city, and they're kind of looking around, and her husband's kind of he's being whiny, and he's talking about how bad the neighborhood is. Looks out the window, and he's like, "God, look at those two," and it's Slam and Holly.
Yeah, her two best friends.
Yeah, so overall, I think it pretty much covers the emotional spectrum.
It does,
and it covers it well. They're very intense feelings of humor or sadness or despair, or hope, or the final lovey scene. Like, you really feel it, and. I'll be the first to criticize media for always including the love interest and stuff like that. And how many movies can you name that don't have a love something in them? It didn't really feel.
The romance didn't feel forced.
No,
I enjoyed it.
I think it added to the story, which is rare. I think it usually detracts.
I'm a fan of romance. I like romance in comics. I like romance in media. I just always have.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it. I think the movie Pearl Harbor is maybe a good exhibition of that.
Pulling the Pearl Harbor reference, okay.
Pearl Harbor, yeah. Because there was a ton of just historical context and so many great ways that they could have gone with it. And the direction that they chose was just a stupid love story with Ben Affleck and whoever else. And there's so much source material that they had, and then just squandered it because somebody had to make out at the end.
Sure. Romance, just like any aspect of a story, can be handled poorly or it can be handled well. When it's handled well, I think it really helps to round out a story, and this is definitely an example of that.
I would agree.
So all in all, these two series here, 1 through 4, this is Catwoman Volume 3.
By Brubaker.
1 through 4 and 12 through 16. From what I understand, and from what I can tell from reading these, would you say if somebody wanted to go and pick up the whole set from 1 through 16, is that worth their time as well?
Oh, absolutely. This was kind of my deal. This was my find. So I picked out these two, the 1 through 4 and the 12 through 16. That's not to say that the story that happens in between isn't good. The story that happens in between is fantastic. I don't think it has the wide breadth of plot twists and emotional turmoil and stuff that 12 through 16 does. 12 through 16 is just brilliant in my opinion. But I would buy the whole series. I think he did the first 36 issues or so. You should be able to pick it up on eBay for like $40-$50. We're talking barely over $1 an issue.
Sure, but that being said, if you're just looking for a cheap, good deal on some first-run comics, non-reissue, non-reprint, go out and actually get the original run from almost 15 years ago. Catwoman 1 through 4, and then 12 through 16, under $15. You can probably go to your local comic book shop and ask, where's the Catwoman section? Right? They'll point you over there, you can go pull them out. They'll charge you $13, $14, maybe $15 for this. They bookend each other really well. It's a wonderful read. I would absolutely recommend this to anybody that has even a passing interest in Catwoman,
or doesn't,
or just comics in general.
Yeah.
It's really quite good, and for $15 you can't beat it. like you said, if you want to get the whole thing, go for it. But 1 through 4 and 12 through 16 is a super solid find.
Yeah. Not to mention, there's been a lot of media attention about how we need more good, positive female lead characters and stuff.
This absolutely fulfills
that. And it happened 15 years before the criticism.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
Yeah. All right, so that's it for this week. This has been Comic Talk. This is our bargain bin episode, again, for Catwoman by Brubaker, Series 3. I believe that started in 2002. Make sure to like and subscribe. Comment down below about anything you'd like us to talk about. If you know any bargain bin series out there that you think we should take a look at and review, let us know. We'd love to hear about it. Also, coming up on Wednesday, as we do every Wednesday, we have a poll list show. We have 3 to 5 comics each week that we talk about. We let you know if we think you should pick them up, if you should give them a try. So tune back in for that.